Hello, I'm Dr. Holly Hampy. I'm the Program Director for the Health Administration Program at Robert Morris, and today I've got the opportunity and the great pleasure to be interviewing Diane Hupp from Children's Hospital. Thank you very much for coming.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to be here this morning.
Diane, as far as your journey to becoming the Vice President of Operations and the Chief Nursing Officer at Children's, can you tell us how you got there?
Certainly. I really had a great opportunity several years ago, or should I say many years ago, when I started volunteering at the Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh when I was in my senior year at Duquesne University. I then transitioned to what then was called a child care assistant. Similar today would be a nursing student intern. And after those opportunities, I ended up after graduation starting as a staff nurse. Through several different leadership roles of nurse manager, director of different areas, I was asked to assume many interim roles throughout my career at Children's, and I feel they've been very good to me. My passion, though, is always to be the chief nursing officer at the hospital. Through different leadership nursing roles, I finally did have the opportunity when our former CNO stepped down to move into that role on an interim basis. And after about 6 or 9 months, I was offered the position. So again, that was always my passion, to be the chief nursing officer. Certainly the path to get there was through various areas in the hospital, including inpatient, outpatient, some support services.
Diane, could you tell us about your education?
Yes, I am a graduate of Duquesne University with my undergrad as a BSN. After a few years of working at the Children's Hospital, I did proceed to obtain my Master of Science in Nursing Administration. And at that time, I didn't really know if I wanted to focus on administration or education, because I also like to teach. However, at the time when I was my first year in my master's studies at Duquesne, I was offered the nursing manager job. So I thought it was very appropriate that I study more in the administrative realm. And then more recently, with my role in trying to influence and really accentuate the importance of degrees, I thought it would only be right that I go back and secure the highest degree of nursing, which is a doctorate in nursing practice, in which I did receive that from the University of Pittsburgh.
Good for you. Now, describe the organizational structure at Children's as far as who reports to you. Now, you also have the role of Vice President of Operations besides the Chief Nursing Officer role. So, who reports to you?
Yes, our reporting structure at Children's Hospital I would describe as flat and frankly quite lean. We have a president who actually oversees 2 facilities, and there are primarily 2 other vice presidents, one of myself, who, as you said, has the hospital operations, as well as the chief nursing officer role, and a second vice president who oversees the financial, he's the CFO, but also oversees all of ambulatory outpatient services. Because we do work in a large health system, some of our support services, such as human resources, are centralized, IT, but for the most part, we run with 2 vice presidents. Those that report to me, I have a structure, again, which I would say is lean, and those direct reports to me have very large scopes and spans of control. We do have strategic service lines, so Children's is known for their transplant, for their heart. So I have director-level nurses who oversee specific nursing patient care units, but also outpatient areas, so that we really are focused on the continuum of care of our patients.
Now, Children's doesn't just have adults, or children, it has adults also, correct?
We do see some adults. They are fairly strategic in the adults we see. For example, our heart services and Heart Institute does have a congenital heart disease program. Those are adult patients that have congenital heart diseases that truly the adult physicians aren't as comfortable in caring for. So our program, we would bring in the adults. They're seen, they're oftentimes operated on as well.
Now, is there a typical day in your life?
I would have to honestly say there is not a typical day. My day does, I would say unfortunately, sit in many meetings, but I try to be quite strategic in meetings and really take a look at what do I have to be in, what can be delegated, Is this really necessary? Do we need a meeting, or can this be done virtually through online communications? I think many times administrators get caught up in so many meetings that there's barely time to sit down and do the work. And part of being a vice president of hospital operations or a chief nursing officer is strategizing and having a vision and ensuring that you create very good goals and that you can articulate and communicate those goals and the strategies to get to the outcomes so that you do continue to reach higher states of excellence in your organization.
I can remember my children thinking that all I did was go to meetings and that's what they thought would be fun. But as you said, if you go to meetings all day, then the work doesn't get done until the evening or in the weekends.
Yes.
No,
I
go
would
ahead.
add, as part of my day, certainly there are meetings and there are times that I can quietly strategize and do work, but there are also much of the day in which administrators and executives do need to sometimes get involved in what we call putting out fires. And whether there's infrastructure issues that are impacting patient care, such as outages, facility issues in the organization. As many of you know, our society is becoming more violent, more volatile. We have a large police force at the hospital that reports up through myself of approximately 45 police officers. So there are issues when they raise to levels that need further attention and further guidance or just frankly input on how we address those. I become involved.
Now, if we take your role of the chief nursing officer, what specific responsibilities do you have for that position?
As the chief nursing officer, my primary responsibility is truly to ensure and oversee and guide safe, quality, excellent patient care. Second to that, and really just as important, is the people part of it. I do need to oversee that we have the right people in the right places to do the jobs very well. So if we have happy, satisfied staff, I do believe our quality and our satisfaction of our patients and families will rise. There's also a component certainly of being financially a good finance steward as an executive, and more the chief nursing officer's role or the vice president of operations role does include the oversight of very large budgets, and you're held accountable to ensure that you're meeting those budgets, and whether that's productivity standards on different patient care areas and ancillary support departments, as well as managing your expense as well.
Now, you have two hats, the vice president of operations and the chief nursing officer. Is there additional responsibilities that vice president of operations would have?
The additional responsibilities of operations really rest in a couple areas. First will be the surgical arena. Many times the surgical arena is under the vice president of operations as opposed to the chief nurse. Surgery drives the biggest volume and revenue in the hospital. So much of the dollars are caught up in the perioperative or surgical arena. So many times that goes to the operations, which in this case, because I hold those roles, that reports up through me. But dealing with physicians and surgeons and anesthesiologists and ensuring flow and throughput through those perioperative areas is key and instrumental to really having an effective surgical arena in your organization. In addition, support areas such as radiology, pharmacy, the laboratories, in addition, the police force, and all, frankly, support services that help impact the work of those direct caregivers reports up through the hospital operations at this point.
You mentioned the budget. How do you establish your budget?
Primarily, there's multiple ways that I know organizations do establish and develop budgets. Much of how we develop our budget is really driven on what we call a run rate. Looking at history over the past 12 years, saying what did you spend to help forecast what you'll need next year, with definitely some assumptions that need to be made as it relates to growth, to volume, to new programs, new services that you may want to add in your organization that wouldn't be in your history, but that you need to closely develop a return on investment. So a good example I could give you would be, I'm going to transition an acute care unit, a med-surg unit, to an ICU. With that transition comes higher levels of care. more support services because of the nature of the work in an ICU, as you can imagine, as compared to an acute care unit. So when you do that, if that's going to occur this next fiscal year, I would need to look at putting a plan together that would really outline well how many nurses, how many support staff, if there's any impact to that unit as it relates to other expenses such as supplies and drugs that would all impact the overall bottom line. Coupled with, how are we going to offset all those additional expenses with the new revenue that will be generated from that unit?
Now, their healthcare, as I say to the students, the only thing certain in healthcare is going to change. So what type of challenges have you seen in healthcare lately?
Some of the biggest challenges that I've seen in healthcare over the past, say, decade would be first and foremost the financial challenges. Hospitals are receiving less reimbursement, and there's many reasons for that, but it's a push and pull with the providers, us as the hospitals, and the insurers, and what we're going to get paid for the work we're doing. The best example I can give there is if you've ever been in the hospital and you may be there for a night, and someone would typically come in the room and say, "You're here on an observation status." Payers provide hospitals a certain rate for an observation status as opposed to an admission. Even though you as the patient and myself as the nurse and the doctor admitted you to the patient, there's a huge difference between the payment of an observation status as well as an admission. And even though the care isn't much different, if any at all, the stay could be a day, in which case one might argue that's an observation, but you could be there 3 or 4 days or longer and still be only paid that minimal observation status payment. A big challenge in hospitals today. We also look at, when we think about the Affordable Care Act and when we think about how that has changed the quality versus the cost versus our satisfaction, all of that has to be looked together. Giving quality care and giving cost-effective care. Because if you can't manage the dollars well, we won't be able to stay in business. So there is a real push and pull between delivering quality, service-oriented care while still maintaining costs.
Is there challenges that are specific to your age population, like with children? Is there things that are challenging just because of that age group?
One of the things that we have done as it relates to the Affordable Care Act is we used to always be age 21, would be the routine age that we see patients through their 21st birthday. With some of the changes in legislation as it relates to young adults being able to remain on their parents' insurance up through age 26, we've actually altered our admissions to state routinely patients and young adults through the age of 26 can be cared for at Children's Hospital. And that was a big change for us. Although we've seen some impact, and I think in terms of the quality and the care we delivered, we are still able to do that quite well. If you were a patient that's maybe been followed at Children's Hospital your whole life because you have a chronic disease, a chronic illness, and suddenly you turn 21, it's a big transition to go to the adult facilities because you spent all of your years at the Children's Hospital. So we're making a more intentional, gradual transition to adult facilities through their early years of young adulthood.
What's the typical diagnosis that you have at Children's? What would be some of your more frequent?
More frequent diagnoses in pediatrics, particularly those that we see most commonly in an ED, asthmatics. And that's something we're working on. You've probably heard population health. And that's a buzzword that's been out there a while. And when you think of population health, it's truly treating patients at the right level of care. So many asthmatics, because that's probably one of our most common pediatric diagnoses, comes in through the ED. And they're what we call a frequent flyer. They come back again and again and again with asthmatic flare-ups. We would like to look at that population in our population health workforce to say, how can we better manage that patient? Every time the child has a flare-up, do we need for them to come into the ED? Do they need to be admitted? Or could we work with schools, the school nurses, work with the primary care physicians and pediatricians to try to better have a bundle of care that would prevent them from having to come back to the hospital for all of their asthma attacks. So a lot of work to be done when you think about population health. The other aspect that goes with that, though, is certainly having the data. Many times there are socioeconomic issues that really contribute to hospital admissions and why patients return and why some patients don't return. So the data analytics and the predictive analytics that we want to try to look at so that we have a better idea of who these patients are is really key in the population health management.
You mentioned the Affordable Care Act, and part of that with value-based purchasing, also with readmissions, and you kind of touched on, how to decrease the number of readmissions. How's Children's doing as far as their readmission rates?
Absolutely. So we look at readmissions on a 7-day and a 30-day. But right now we're very much focused on our 7-day readmission rate. So our average readmission rate is approximately 3 to 4%. And although that doesn't sound large, based on our admissions, that equates to about 35 or 40 readmissions within 7 days in a given month. So to me, I want to look at those and say, which ones are preventable and which ones are unpreventable. So included in that number may be patients that there's a planned readmission. Patient comes in, has an unfortunate diagnosis of cancer, starts on chemotherapy, and we say, in 5 more days or 6 more days, you come back because you're having another treatment. Those are unpreventable readmissions, but still get counted in numbers. We remove those and then focus on readmissions of patients that we really would hope that we can do some interventions and perform interventions that would eliminate and prevent that. Some initiatives we're working on are follow-up phone calls, ensuring that patient has a follow-up appointment with a primary care physician within 7 days so that that PCP could help collaborate with us at the hospital to potentially eliminate that. Everyone may not be able to be eliminated, but there's certainly a number. Do we need to provide more home care? Home care nursing in pediatrics is very much a challenge because of the supply and demand. There's a greater demand than we have a supply to manage the patient volume because we have a lot of chronic complex patients that we're sending home. But if we could send home care into these patients' homes within a week, we could probably prevent some of the readmissions as well. So those are a few things that we're looking at. But again, the data is ever so important in being able to really fish out and analyze what's real readmissions and what are those that we have to say we planned for and they're okay to come back as a readmission.
Unfortunately, the government only sees readmissions as all the readmissions, and hopefully
You are
they can
absolutely right. And part of that Accountable Care Act, and I mentioned briefly, but it's a good example that Holly mentions, is readmissions and how we're reimbursed. So there are many readmissions, if you come back within a week, the hospital just won't be paid. They look at that as bundled in the original care and the original admission that the patient may have had 1 week ago. So again, there's a lot of reasons why we want to focus on a readmission and preventing that readmission.
You mentioned bundle payment. Can you explain that a little further for the students?
Sure. So bundled payments comes into play not only with readmissions, but we receive a bundled payment when we have a patient that comes in, maybe for a procedure, and the typical stay and the norm may be a 3-day stay. But we end up having a hospital-acquired infection that would lead to a week stay or even a 10-day stay because the patient may have acquired a hospital-acquired infection, a central line infection, a urinary tract infection, a pressure ulcer, a hospital-acquired condition. When that occurs, that clearly delays discharge of the patient and adds patient days. We don't receive payment, for the most part, on how many days the patient stays in the hospital. Bundle payments are that for this type of admission, in this type of surgery, the insurers provide this payment. So you may, I'm saying hypothetically, you come in for X procedure and you will be paid $5,000, whether they're there 3 days or whether they're there a week. That's a bundle payment.
Now, other challenges in healthcare and being the chief nursing officer is staffing. Have you had any problems getting nurses or aides to work?
Clearly, if you look at the predictions, there will be another significant nursing shortage. And some organizations, I feel, do have a nursing shortage because, again, the demand is greater than the supply of nurses. At Children's Hospital, within our own four walls there, I feel quite fortunate in terms of the ability to recruit and even retain nurses. When you look at average nursing turnover rate, and nursing really makes up at least 60% in general of hospital employees. So their turnover rate drives the organizational turnover rate and how many people you lose, which subsequently leads to how many people you need to hire in a given year. I would say we do quite well. Our turnover rate over the past year has been about 10%. National average is more on the lines of 12 or 14 or even higher. When you think about how many nurses we're generating and replacing, at Children's we can attract them, and I do believe we have a good pipeline. I think there are other organizations that do struggle more so as it relates to bringing the nurses in. But right now at the Children's Hospital, we even have a waiting list, and I'm proud of that.
Now, you mentioned who reports to you. Now, who do you report to?
I report to our president of Children's Hospital, Chris Gessner, and I work very closely with him, in particularly as it relates to strategic planning. He leaves the operations to the operational staff, myself and my operational leaders, but when it comes to strategic planning, which really is a roadmap to the future. So if you have a vision that we want to be the best pediatric hospital in the world and deliver the best care, that's a very lofty goal, and we hope to do that. But the strategic plan is really the how, the process of how we're going to get there. What are our goals? And even once you determine goals, what are your strategies or tactics that will help you reach your goals? And that's really what our president does exceptionally well, and looks to us to help strategize on that, but even more so help execute and implement.
Now, he would report to the board of directors. What's your involvement with the board?
Correct. My involvement of the board is that I am a member of the board of directors of Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh. Members on our board are primarily community members that really are committed to the mission and the vision of our hospital at Children's. I provide a report to the board a couple times a year. One is an annual nursing report on what's happening within the realm of nursing, our recruitment, our retention, what are strategic initiatives, patient experience, and data that they want to see to ensure that we're on track to continue to elevate ourselves. I also report on safety and quality as it relates to hospital incidents and our support services. So there are different reports that I would provide to the board, and certainly be there at each of the board meetings to help answer questions and be engaged in the discussions.
Now, you mentioned that patient safety initiatives that you would report to the board. Can you give some ideas of what patient safety initiatives that you've implemented at Children's?
Sure. Patient safety, in my mind, is number one, above all. I have the opportunity to talk to new employees and every new nurse twice a month that comes in through the doors. And I really give them three messages. The first and foremost is that patient safety has to come above all. Even above my second priority of service, or what I'd say the art of nursing, the art of caring. And third, I speak to them about speaking up. But getting back to the patient safety, because I feel that trumps everything. If you can't be safe, the service won't matter. Because if you can't be safe and you cause harm, we have a much greater issue. Things that we've done to really put ourselves on the map as it relates to patient safety has to do with, first and foremost, we have a condition help program. A condition help program provides the opportunity to patients and parents and family members to be able to call a rapid response team 24/7, 365, any hour of the day or night and any day. And we will, if a parent calls a condition help because they feel my child may be deteriorating, my child just isn't right, and they believe nobody's listening. Many times They may not be physiologically deteriorating, but the parents are so frustrated because they don't understand the plan of care. They have a right to pick up the phone and dial a number and simply say condition, help, and give the room number. At that point in time, within minutes, a rapid response team, including a nurse administrator, patient representative if they're on duty, as well as a physician not involved in their care, immediately comes to the room to hear the parent out, to look at the patient, ensure the patient is safe and in a good place, and then figure out how we can work with the family to have them better feel that we are meeting their needs. And that we were the leader in the nation with that condition help program. It really stemmed from what's called the Josie King story. And if you ever have time, just Google Josie King. And you'll hear about a little girl that actually died in a children's hospital. Not Children's of Pittsburgh, but another children's hospital. And the parent really felt that the mom kept calling out, saying something was wrong with her child, and nobody was listening. So there's a lot to be learned from that story. We've partnered with her. She's come to our hospital to present, and there's really nothing like hearing from the voice of a parent or the voice of a patient on how they've been impacted by care in a hospital.
You know, Sentinel events, the Joint Commission shows communication as being the #1 reason why Sentinel events occur. I know Children's has done a lot as far as communication, and can you explain your huddles and your daily
Absolutely.
Reports?
I couldn't agree more. When I look at all the condition helps, and there have been hundreds over the decade we've had it in place, the #1 root cause would be just what Holly said, communication. So what we've done are a few things. First, we do believe and we empower every frontline staff to raise the red flag. And maybe not literally the red flag, but to speak up. There are many ways they can speak up. We have a quality line, 24/7. Pick up the quality line, and even if you don't want to say who you are, leave us a message that you have a concern that there's something unsafe happening in the hospital that we can take a look at quickly. Secondly, we do have safety huddles. We have a safety huddle every morning sharp at 8 a.m. Myself or our Vice President of Medical Affairs, medical officer, leads that call. And the call is really to do a couple things. First, to take a look back over the past 24 hours for anything that occurred that may have impacted safety. And it's also a look forward to say, are we aware of anything occurring in the hospital that might impact patient or staff safety? And third, it's to increase transparency among all key leaders so that if there are things happening, we have an obligation to take that back to our frontline staff. On that call are all key leaders from all nursing areas, support services, our police, IT, biomed, facilities, construction, radiology, lab, pharmacy. There's about 20 different leaders. It's a very brief call. The call takes no more than 5 to 7 minutes. We start out and say it's a peer protected safety call. We want to go through every leader and give the leader the opportunity to either say there's a report or many times there's no report. The report needs to be very straightforward and succinct. Some examples that are given. We had a significant med error. We state what the med error is, and the following day, that leader is to come back with a follow-up. So part of that is ensuring if we have an event, there's very prompt follow-up that people know. And that if it's impacting or it could impact your area, and not just the unit or department in which it occurred, that we take that message back in hopes of preventing that from happening again. We may also hear about infrastructure issues. So if we have an outage in the hospital, may have a water outage, that impacts everyone. And is everybody on board on what are the steps we're taking to mitigate the impact of the water outage? We may have an IT outage that relates to the electronic health record we're on. We may have a scanner down. Any of those that are high-level global safety issues that impact the hospital are mentioned on the call. We also have safety huddles that are done in the departments so that every day when the day begins, and if you're 24/7 at the beginning of the next shift, there should be a safety huddle with all members. Again, not taking up a lot of time, but frankly, it's a 3 to 4 minute, 5 minute safety huddle in which we say, over the past week, because everybody's not there every day, so we want to continue to give the same messages for at least a week. Let me provide you 2 or 3 safety issues. May have occurred in our department, may have occurred in another department, but it would be good to remind staff. Could be a change in a product that may impact the change in a process that we want to remind staff about. We also certainly have quality and safety forums in the hospital that staff lead, and that there are leaders on there that help facilitate, so that we do empower the staff to say, please bring up on your units and your departments what's happening as it relates to maintaining a safe, effective, quality, high quality hospital.
You mentioned earlier about working with the surgeons. You also work with the entire medical staff. How's that communication made with the physicians?
Yes, we have a large medical staff at Children's Hospital. Again, multiple forums, but it starts with, I believe, relationships on the units with nurses and physicians. So I can certainly send out communications, and I provide updates at what we call our Medical Executive Committee of the board as it relates to some quality safety issues, as it relates to nursing issues that they may be impacted by. But I believe the best way to communicate is starting on the front lines with nurses and physicians. So when we have huddles, if a physician can join in the morning, it's ideal. If they can't, because schedules and logistics, we have a nurse leader and a physician leader on every unit that work together to collaborate to make that happen and to ensure communications can be as high quality as they can. Because again, I don't want to diminish what Holly said, is probably one of the most important things and reasons that we have issues in hospitals comes down to the communication amongst caregivers.
And I think too, with the medical staff, if you involve them in the beginning in a project, they're much more willing to take that change as opposed to finding out at the end when the change has been made.
I fully agree. Whether that's the physician or whether that's the frontline nurse, whether that is the support service aide that's helping, if you can involve them early on and offer them an opportunity to provide their input on the change. And maybe the change has to happen, because there are certainly changes that have to occur and may come top down, but at least to provide them, one, the opportunity to say how we're going to make that change happen. And two, let's be sure we give a timeline that seems reasonable to people. Very important.
So what's the most enjoyable things that you do in your position?
The most enjoyable in my job, I have to say, and I don't think it would be any secret, including my own boss, is to being a nurse. If I were said, Diane, you can be the chief nurse or you can be the vice president of operations, I love being the chief nurse. And I think anyone that knows me would say that. Although I don't have direct patient care every day, and I'm not in providing the actual care, my role as the chief nurse is to facilitate care getting done in the highest quality manner that it can be done. And it does take good, strong leaders to make that happen. I also like having the influence on making things happen. So it may not always be what Diane says exactly, but when I have strong leaders that can come back and say to me, Diane, that's a good idea, but I think we should take it this way, I have to listen to that, and I have to be engaged and feel strong enough about my leaders that I can change my way of thinking. And people challenging me in a constructive way is always a good thing. Whether that's my boss, who probably, it's very easy for my boss, but it's also my direct reports. So being a nurse, having influence on people, and frankly seeing people grow. I'm fortunate at the hospital to have a significant number of strong leaders. Very strong both in the operations world and in the nursing arena. And if you ever read the book, Good to Great, the first thing it talks about is truly, do you have the right people on the bus? Because if you don't, you have to move those seats around. So the key to my success in making things happen in that hospital is having the wonderful people that report to me and that truly help me to make it happen.
On the opposite end, what do you particularly don't care for in your job?
There's not a lot I don't care for, but the struggle is time management. And I don't like not having enough time to do everything I want to do every day. But as an executive in a very complex, busy organization that has a lot of demands and a lot of expectations, you have to come to terms with yourself to say everything on the list is not going to get done, and it may not even get done this week. So there does exist a level of determination, but a level of prioritization that you have to live with to say, here's what the priorities are of the day and of the week, and frankly, of the next few months. And that's where the goal setting and the expectations on what needs done in what time frames is so important, because everyone struggles with time management. But at times, I feel, am I robbing people that report to me because they need maybe a little more time? Or I didn't have the extra 10 minutes to stop in the hall when maybe I could tell they would love to just stop and chat. So that's a struggle, and I think it's a work in progress, and it's a real balance.
Yeah, there's only 24 hours in a day. Sometimes you wish there's 26 hours, at least 2 on your own hours that nobody else had.
Most definitely.
You mentioned strong leaders in your organization. Are they individuals that you hired and made them leaders, or when you hired them, what kind of traits were you looking for that clay that the mold? How do you determine how a leader will be for you, or hiring a leader?
That's a great question. To answer your first, I have hired leaders that I felt were already exceptionally strong. I've hired other leaders that I said they have great leadership potential. I can tell. So I'm going to hire them, and I may be what I call hiring them up in the position, but I think in due time they'll get to where they need to be. And frankly, they've both worked out both ways. The characteristics and the qualities I look for in a leader is not necessarily the highest clinical skills. So if I'm hiring a nursing leader, I may say they don't have to be the best nurse on the unit, the best clinician. They may not even have a specialty in that area. For example, if I need an ICU leader, director, they may say, well, I've never worked in the ICUs. Am I going to be able to do that job? I believe if you're a strong enough leader, you will surpass those issues of, well, that person's never worked in the ICU, how can they lead us? A good example, I would say, is an opportunity that I had years ago of being a perioperative director. I didn't work in the operating room as a staff nurse. That would have helped, no doubt. But we were in a time where we needed an interim person to go in and help with the leadership. So I was asked to do that. And I was a bit taken back, and even went back to my leader and said, I'm not sure I'm the right person. I've never worked in the operating room. Behind those red doors, it's very different. Maybe we need someone with operating room experience. But it was more the leader they were looking for. So when I look at and it all worked out well. And frankly, I stayed there for about 7 years. But what really, when I look at as a leader, is number one, do they have transformational leadership? Are they someone that has a vision, can set goals, can communicate well, and can they execute? As opposed to being a good staff nurse, being a good OR nurse, being a good police officer. Can you be the leader? Maybe not, because those skills of communication, those skills of ability to influence other, those skills of being professional, compassionate, being an exceptional listener, they to me come above the tactical skills of what we're asking the staff to do in that department.
So what advice would you have for the students that are looking to get into healthcare? Some of the students may be nursing, some may have healthcare administration undergraduate, maybe nuclear medicine, maybe a variety of things. What advice would you give to them as far as they're starting out to get that first position?
My best advice is, one, set a goal for yourself. Set a goal for yourself to say, here's what I want to do in so much due time. Second, I would say, find a mentor. Find somebody that's, even if you have a job and you have a boss and you look at your boss as a mentor, because I can relate to that. I feel my boss still takes time to mentor me. But find someone additional that you feel, maybe not even in the same workplace, maybe somebody that's outside your professional arena that can help you to sit down and work through issues, work through challenges. I have had a mentor throughout my entire career. I still have one today. And I'm very grateful for the generous time and commitment that this individual's made to me to help me progress in my career. If you're going into a first job, seeing if you can shadow, and I know Robert Morris has some of that in many of their programs here, where you go in to say, is this what I really want to do? I find sometimes someone, comes to me and says, I want to do your job. And I say, okay, there'll be a time where my job will be open. Let me talk to you about what that will take. Let me talk to you about, how about spend a day with me? How about spend, a couple hours, a couple different days to see if you really want that. Is that really your goal? For some, I think it is. And for others, after that one day, to say, this probably isn't what I want to spend my time doing. So I think really understanding what you want to do and finding yourself a mentor. And finally, always going back to better your education. I thought when I got out of school having a baccalaureate degree, it was great, and it is great. And I'm very for individuals having baccalaureate degrees and bachelor's degrees. But beyond that, there's more education. So never stop learning. And whether that's formal education, whether that's going to conferences, whether that's networking, which would be probably the other area that I think we all have opportunity, connections and networking turn out to people and places and opportunity. So mentoring, networking, shadowing, furthering education, and really setting a goal are some of the top things that are important that can lead to good things and lead you to better places.
So when this individual comes to interview with you, what are you looking for at that time in that interview process?
Many of the questions now when we interview are not as much, did you do that, did you have experience in that, but more behavioral. Tell me how you would handle a situation if it presented to you, and depending what I'm interviewing for, I put them in situationals. So situations that I know may occur in the hospital. How would you deal with if you had two staff in conflict? How would you deal with if you had a tech in radiology and one of our radiology physicians that are in conflict? How would you deal with that? How would you try to resolve that? So be prepared to sit in interviews where they'll turn it more into situations and have you explain how you either have dealt with it, or if you haven't been in that situation, how you would methodically deal with that.
In closing, what final comments or remarks would you like to make to the students regarding healthcare, your position, leadership?
First, I would say to you, congratulations of where you are, because you're already educating yourselves in what you hope to set your mind out to do. I would tell you that you may start out thinking you want to do this, but things changed. I never thought I wanted to be a nurse through more than midway through my college career, and I had a vision come to me. May or may not happen to you, doesn't happen to everyone. I thought I wanted to study business and computer science and IT. That was more my niche. And I still like the business aspects of it, but I changed. I would tell you to always be passionate about what you're doing. Do something that you like, that you enjoy. Getting up every day and going to a job just for the dollars or just for the prestige of maybe the position it is, it won't last. You have to like and frankly love what you do every day. I don't think I could be at Children's Hospital for the 30 plus years I've been there as a staff nurse and in many different areas in the hospital if I really didn't love helping to support and helping to facilitate the care of children. It's a passion. So try to find your passion. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to seek people out. Don't be afraid to email people to say, do you have an extra 30 minutes to meet with me to try try to help me develop my career. There are many people out there that do have an interest and a passion for doing just that, because it takes sometimes more than yourselves to get to where you want to get to.
Great advice. Thank you very much. Thank you, the students, for watching the interview. I know that you'll have taken a lot of good information from Diane and her journey to becoming the Chief Nursing Officer and the Vice President of Operations, and I'd like to thank you very much for doing that.
I'd like to thank you for having me today. It's really my privilege. It's my honor to be able to share any part of what I've learned throughout my journey at Children's Hospital and my professional career journey with others that may can benefit. So good luck to all of you, and thank you again. I wish you well.
Thank you. You're an expert. It's so easy to talk to you.
Okay, good. I know, the only hard part is looking at that.
Well,
but
you know, it's like,
it's the only hard, because I feel like I'm not, you
it's
know.
like, okay, but whenever you watch it, it's.
Yeah, I did. I saw Dr. Yested's, and yes.
But once Adam gets it finished, he sends it off to get, because we have ADA compliance, he sends it off to get a
Yes.
get a transcript of it. Once it's done, I'll send you it so you can
Okay.
see it. And,
All right.
but
All
you're
right.
wonderful. Let me go tell Adam to shut the camera off. And
Okay, very good.